We need to talk about something very serious. This quote. Fuck motivation. It's a fickle and unreliable little dick fuck and isn't worth your time. Better to cultivate discipline than to rely on motivation. Force yourself to do things. Force yourself to get out of bed and practice. Force yourself to work. Motivation is fleeting and it's easy to rely on because it requires no concentrated effort to get. Motivation comes to you and you don't have to chase after it. Discipline is reliable. Motivation is fleeting. The question isn't how to keep yourself motivated, it's how to train yourself to work without it. This is the favorite quote of every Redditor who just got into self-help. And it helps, sure, for those who are waiting for that spark of inspiration and never did anything they didn't feel like doing. Basically 12-year-olds. The truth is though that normal people don't even seriously use the terms discipline and motivation. This is just self-help lingo. The problem I have with this sentiment is that it closes the conversation. It keeps it at level 1 and doesn't ask further questions. Level 0 is what do I do if I don't feel like doing something? Level 1 is do it anyway. But there are further levels of understanding that we can get to and should if we're taking this seriously. We need to start with the definition of motivation. If you tried to describe it yourself, you would probably define it as enthusiasm for doing something. That's the first definition in the Cambridge Dictionary. The post I quoted at the beginning uses pretty much this definition. The problem with that quote is that it defines motivation as just a temporary feeling. If you define it as insignificant, then of course it's by definition not very useful. The thing is that this is also not the primary use of this word. In common speech it may be, but if we're taking the matter seriously, we need a more serious definition. The next definition given is the need or reason for doing something, or by Merriam-Webster, motivated meaning provided with a motive, having an incentive or a strong desire to do well or succeed in some pursuit. This definition relates to the word motive. Motive is the thing that motivates a person, creates motivation. Motive is a word that everyone understands. In a crime, suspects can have motives whether or not they've committed a crime. If a person has a motive for committing a crime and they believe that that is the best choice for them, then they commit the crime. In regular life, if your car breaks down in the middle of nowhere, you have no choice. You need to call for help, whether you feel like it or not. It's not like you're super pumped about it, it's just what you end up doing. It doesn't matter if you need to call your dad and he's going to beat your ass for stealing his car. You do it without question. So the motive for calling for help is that you don't want to starve for death. Actually, that's also a choice, but I will come back to that later. So motivation is a real thing. It's what pushes you to do one thing or another, and it's something that you can influence. Discipline, on the other hand, until you make a decision, is basically not something that exists itself. A disciplined person is a person who typically did things they didn't feel like, and we're assuming that nothing's changed, and from there the word discipline is derived. But there is no discipline as an intrinsic quality. It's sort of an umbrella term. If you did something you didn't feel like doing because you knew it was good for you, you were motivated by its benefits. And disciplined also. But discipline is fickle and unreliable. Sometimes you end up doing something you don't want to, sometimes you don't. A motive is the reason why you feel the need to choose the thing that you actually want deep down inside, as per the definition. It's just about how stable your motivation is. Being motivated to go to the gym by the prospect of it being kinda cool to have abs is fickle. But being motivated by having a real goal that you're actually striving for, and also by you actually liking it, makes you want to go to the gym much more reliably. Being motivated by being able to provide for your family is what reliably makes you go to a job you hate every day. Otherwise, if you wanted to be able to consistently make that choice every day, you would actually have to like it or get used to it, enough that you just don't care. Using a little willpower every now and then to conjure up discipline is okay, but if you don't even have a good enough reason to do something, you're not going to do it in the long term. Check out my video about the valid reason hypothesis. This definition of motivation that I use also harkens back to one of the famous self-improvement quotes. It's not about what you want, it's about what you need. So it would be cool to learn a new language, but that's not reality. The reality is that you come home tired after a hard day at work. What is your goal in life? Do you need to learn a new language to move closer to that goal? Do you need to achieve that goal? Is it non-negotiable? Maybe relaxing is actually more important to get you closer to that goal. And why learn a new language? Why not just use that time to work more? Is it completely unacceptable for someone in your position to not know an extra language? If your ultimate need in life is to be fairly satisfied in all basic areas of life and live a pleasant life, then relaxing in the evening fits that goal. But if you feel the need to, for example, become a champion in a sport or make X amount of money for competitive reasons, then you will also need to make different choices. But also, don't sell yourself short. We're sometimes scared to ask ourselves what we truly want because we know that the answer would be nothing too assuming. But the truth is, that's probably not what we really want. That's cope. And I hate all this pseudopsychology, but it's true. Like, would it be so bad to try just a little bit harder at something, to maybe make more money, to not have to worry about some things, get the satisfaction of being more capable, be more respected, probably have more fun, honestly, even if that comes with extra stress? Like, no, dude. Probably it's just that all this gets muted when we're focusing too much on the here and now. If you're investing just a little bit of effort more into something that may not give you anything special, but maybe it will, and maybe it will be a little bit fun, even if just a little bit, long term, that may be a pretty good deal. Which brings me to my next point. Using motivation in everyday life is just about focusing on these big needs and cutting out the noise. So often, we're just clouding our needs with extra junk. I need to relax a little. I need to have work-life balance. I need to have some fun in life. I need to read the news sometimes to know what's going on in the world. I need to also eat sometimes, have good sleep, clean the house every once in a while, and we're just focusing so much on these nice to haves while forgetting about our true priority. When you make something your priority, life still kinda works out. Some things can just be cut out, some things kinda just end up working out by themselves, and some things need to be put as small rocks in your life, as per the big rocks first analogy. If you're working so much that you're actually going to have a mental breakdown, that's a different problem. And it's your individual decision whether you want to risk it. But that's what we're talking about. Are you in the red? Well, that's a more serious problem. Are you in the green? Then you're fine. You can work more. if you decide that that's what you want. But it's not like it's a fine line that you have to walk. It's pretty apparent when you're getting into the pathological territory. Don't second guess yourself all the time. Don't try to find extra pleasures if they don't line up with your goal. Just settle for the reward you get from moving closer to your goal. This is what motivational material does. It says, hey, I know watching a show is pretty sweet, but learning something new is also cool, if you're doing it properly. We make decisions in our everyday lives based on emotions and intuition. It might sound stupid that we need to constantly remind ourselves of what we actually want, but it's true. If a goal is not always at the forefront of your mind, we forget about it almost immediately. And it's not about doing something that's good versus doing something that's bad. It's just about focus, longer term focus. If you're constantly jumping between two activities that can both be considered fairly productive, there's still some slack in between them, and you have poor control over your strategy. And at the end of the day, it's going to result in more time wasted. So to recap, motivation is the need to do something that comes from a motive, the reason. So it's motivation to do something, or you're motivated to do something over everything else, even if that's just because you're not thinking about those other things. You can play into this and remind yourself of this motive and not keep thinking about something else that just came to your mind. When you're studying, it's easy to forget that learning something new is actually pretty cool, even if it's hard. Motivation is not about excitement. Even if you're trying to find the cure for cancer, it's not always going to be fun. You're not always going to be excited to do it. And I'll come back to excitement later. But ultimately, whether you keep working or go watch a show is a choice. But instead of forcing yourself to do it and training discipline, whatever that means, how about you just don't forget why you do it? And then it's not even a question. You just keep working without even explicitly making that choice. Keep that in the front or back of your mind, depending on how you see it, but just not hidden away and brought out only when you actually think seriously about, do I want to continue doing this or find something else? The strategic decision of whether you should drop this whole mission is a separate matter and needs to be addressed in its own time. This whole motivation versus discipline debate may seem like it's just semantics, but again, just do it closes the conversation. And you may like the idea of it and follow it for a couple of days, and then its charm wears off and you're back to square one. The concept of motivation digs deeper. I will be making another video that will be a continuation of this one, where I'll talk a little more about how to cultivate motivation, but I also want to touch on two extra points in this video. First, to come back to the motive of dying. People often toss around the phrase, if I had a gun to my head, and they say the most outrageous things like, I would go to my manager and ask for a promotion and get it, or I would deadlift a car. If only the circumstances were more serious, more dire, pressed me to give more out of myself, I would. To become the best version of yourself, you need to be under extreme outside pressure. This is, again, something that people don't think about, and I have a problem with. First, just because there are some things that you have very little control over. For example, you can't beat physiology. But second, would you? In the Joko podcast episode 250 at 1 hour and 20 minutes, he told a story of soldiers traveling through immense cold with heavy sleeping bags and jackets on their backs. These guys were completely worn out from days of walking, but couldn't drop the bags because they knew they wouldn't survive the cold, harsh night without them. Some of them dropped the bags. Perhaps they risked it for an almost impossible chance that they might survive the night, or perhaps they just chose death. But keep in mind that these were very thoroughly thought through decisions. Maybe they weren't made in conditions that allow for optimal decision making, but they weren't whimsical. These people thought about it a lot. The second point is to actually touch on enthusiasm and excitement instead of actual motivation. Enthusiasm is only a positive as long as you can direct it properly. For example, if you play a lot of video games, of course you're only going to be enthusiastic about playing video games. So in that case, don't follow your enthusiasm. If you're enthusiastic about something that actually relates to and benefits your work, even if it's not directly work itself, for example, learning something, or it's something that you need to do at some point, but you're currently working on something else, go for it. People want to be disciplined and organized and stoic and whatnot, but I think that's just a representation issue. We talk about people who don't want to do something but do it anyway, because we also don't want to do things. But we don't talk about people who just go with the flow and things work out for them, because we just don't understand how they're doing it. We think it's just they're getting lucky, which is partially true, but there's also art in creating luck. It's just much harder to describe. People are different, and while I also hate saying do what's best for you, I mean, we're all human after all. We're all fairly similar, but people should really learn to play the cards that they're dealt. And I don't mean it like if you've only been dealt shitty cards, then you have to make the best out of that anyway. In reality, there are only a couple of characteristics which are basically objectively and only better or worse. IQ, health, etc. Learn to use both enthusiasm and cold structure, and maybe one will end up dominant, but that doesn't matter. You're still using the one that is the most appropriate in a given context. That's all. See you in the next one.